The stories you're about to hear are completely fictional and meant for entertainment only. They aren't based on real people or events, and any similarities are purely coincidental. These tales are crafted to be spooky and suspenseful, so just sit back, relax, and enjoy the imaginative ride. And remember, subscribe, or I might just turn these stories into reality. I uncovered a CIA operation involving child trafficking, and now I'm a target. Hey Reddit, this is my first time posting here, but I really need to get this off my chest. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but here I am. I've always been a pretty average guy, never one to get involved in anything too crazy. But a few months ago, I stumbled onto something that has turned my life into a waking nightmare. I think the CIA is onto me, and I don't know how much longer I have left. If anything happens to me, I hope this post helps someone understand what's really going on. It all started when I was cleaning out my late uncle's house. He was a bit of a recluse, lived alone, and died suddenly of a heart attack. I wasn't particularly close to him, but as his only living relative, it fell to me to sort through his belongings. Among the dusty books and old furniture, I found a locked filing cabinet. It was tucked away in a corner of the basement, almost as if he didn't want anyone to find it. The lock wasn't hard to break. It was an old cabinet, and the metal was rusted. Inside, I found a mess of papers, files, and some old cassette tapes. Most of it looked like conspiracy theory stuff, clippings about UFOs, government cover-ups, that sort of thing. But then, I found a folder labelled Operation Snowbird. At first, it didn't make much sense. The documents were full of redacted lines and cryptic notes. But as I pieced together the fragments, a chilling story began to emerge. It seemed to be evidence of a covert CIA operation involved in human trafficking, specifically children. The details were horrifying. The documents described how they abducted kids from poor, rural areas, shipped them across borders, and sold them to the highest bidders. There were lists of names, dates, locations. Some of the names were people I'd heard of, politicians, celebrities, powerful business moguls. It was sickening. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This was the stuff of nightmares, but the more I read, the more real it became. There were photos too, grainy black and white images of children in cages, kids with blank stares and haunted eyes. One tape was particularly disturbing. It was labelled simply 1986. When I played it, my blood ran cold. It was a recording of a man's voice speaking calmly and methodically, describing how they processed the children. He talked about breaking their spirits, conditioning them to be obedient. He referred to them as assets and commodities. I was horrified. My uncle had been sitting on this information for who knows how long. I wondered if it was what got him killed. Suddenly, every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every creak of the house made me jump, but I couldn't just ignore it. I had to do something. I started by scanning and copying the documents, backing them up on multiple USB drives. I didn't trust my computer, thinking it might be hacked or tracked. I even started using burner phones to communicate with anyone about this. Paranoia began to consume me, but I had to stay one step ahead. Then, strange things started happening. I noticed a black SUV parked down the street from my house. At first, I thought it was a neighbour's car, but it was always there. No matter what time of day or night, it was there. And then I started getting phone calls, blocked numbers, just silence on the other end. Once, I picked up and heard someone breathing heavily before the line went dead. I decided to dig deeper into the names I found in the documents. One name stood out. A senator who was outspoken about human rights. It didn't add up. I tried reaching out to a journalist friend, someone I trusted to handle this without freaking out. We met in a crowded cafe where I showed him the files. His face turned white as he read through them. "Jesus, where did you get this?" he whispered. I told him about my uncle, about the filing cabinet. He agreed to help, but he warned me to be careful. These people have connections everywhere. If they know you're onto them, you're in serious danger. That night, My house was broken into. They didn't take anything, didn't make a mess, but it was clear they were looking for something. I checked my hiding spots. Everything was still there, but they knew. They knew I had something, and they were getting closer. A week later, my journalist friend was found dead. Officially, it was a car accident, but I knew better. The brakes had been tampered with. Panic set in. They were tying up loose ends, and I was next. I packed a bag with essentials, took my backup drives, and went on the run. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the police. For all I knew, they were in on it too. I started moving from motel to motel, never staying in one place for more than a night. I kept my head down, avoided cameras, paid in cash. But no matter what I did, they were always one step behind. I'd catch glimpses of the black SUV, feel eyes on me in crowded places. I was living in a constant state of fear, always looking over my shoulder. I'm posting this now from a public library, using a computer that can't be traced back to me. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. If anyone out there can help, please, I need it. I'm scared and I don't know what to do. If you don't hear from me again, at least you'll know why. There are people out there, powerful, dangerous people, who will stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. And they're coming for me. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I'm still on the run, but I've managed to stay one step ahead of them. Barely. Thanks for all the support and advice from those who reached out after my first post. It means a lot, even if I can't respond to everyone. I'm doing my best to stay alive, but things have gotten even worse. After my last post, I decided to head out of state. I thought maybe if I put some distance between myself and my pursuers, I could figure out my next move. I took a bus, paid for the ticket in cash, and wore a hat and sunglasses to avoid being recognized. The ride was long and tense. Every time we stopped, I half expected someone to grab me, but I made it to the next town without incident. I found a cheap motel on the outskirts and paid for a week in advance. The place was a dump, peeling wallpaper, a suspicious stain on the carpet, and the smell of mildew everywhere. But it was off the beaten path. Perfect for lying low. For the first few days, I stayed inside, only going out at night to grab food. I kept the TV on to drown out my thoughts, but every little noise outside made my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in. I decided it was time to go through the documents again, see if there was something I missed, something that could help me figure out my next move. I spread the papers out on the dingy motel bed, scrutinizing every word, every photo. One document caught my eye. It was a list of names, but these weren't the same as the ones in the other files. These were kids' names, along with dates and locations. I realized they were records of abductions. My stomach churned as I read through them. One name stood out. A girl who was taken from a town not too far from where I was staying. Feeling a mix of dread and determination, I decided to go there. Maybe I could find someone who remembered her, someone who could give me more information. I knew it was risky, but I didn't have much choice. The next morning, I checked out of the motel and took another bus to the small town. It was a sleepy place, the kind where everyone knows everyone else. I went to the local diner and struck up a conversation with the waitress. She was friendly enough, and after some small talk, I casually mentioned the girl's name. Her face darkened immediately. "Why do you want to know about her?" she asked, suspicion in her eyes. I lied, told her I was a private investigator looking into cold cases. She didn't seem convinced, but told me what she knew. The girl had vanished years ago, and the town had been devastated. There were rumors, of course, talk of strangers seen around the time she disappeared, whispers of something more sinister, but nothing concrete. I thanked her and left the diner, but as I walked back to the bus stop, I felt that familiar prickling sensation. Someone was watching me. I turned and saw a man leaning against a lamppost, staring straight at me. He wore a dark suit and sunglasses, looking completely out of place in this tiny town. Panic surged through me. I quickened my pace, trying to blend into the sparse crowd. When I reached the bus stop, I ducked into a nearby alley and waited. Sure enough, the the man followed. I had to think fast. There was a fire escape on the side of the building. I scrambled up it, my heart pounding in my chest. From the roof, I watched as he looked around, confused. For now, I was safe, but I knew I had to keep moving. I spent the night hiding in an abandoned building. It was cold and uncomfortable, but I couldn't risk going back to a motel. In the early hours of the morning, I heard footsteps. I peeked out a broken window and saw 2 more men, dressed like the first, scanning the area with flashlights. They were thorough, checking every nook and cranny. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. As dawn approached, they finally left. Exhausted but alive, I made my way to the nearest bus station and bought a ticket to the next city. On the bus, I tried to piece everything together. The girl's disappearance, the list of names. There had to be a connection, something I was missing. I decided to head to the library when I arrived. Maybe there were old news articles or records that could give me more clues. When I got there, I found a corner computer and started searching. After hours of digging, I found an article about a whistleblower who tried to expose the operation years ago. He disappeared under mysterious circumstances, but not before leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. Following his trail, I discovered he had a storage unit in a nearby city. It was a long shot, but I had to check it out. I rented a car under a fake name and drove there, my nerves on edge the entire time. The storage facility was run down, the kind of place where people kept forgotten junk. I found the unit number from the whistleblower's files and picked the lock. Inside, it was dark and musty. I found boxes of old papers, more cassette tapes, and a beaten-up laptop. I didn't have time to go through everything there, so I grabbed what I could and left. Back at a new motel, I started sifting through the new evidence. What I found made my blood run cold. The whistleblower had documented everything, names, dates, places. He had proof of the CIA's involvement, the high-ranking officials who were part of it, and detailed accounts of how they covered their tracks. There were photos, videos, and even recordings of conversations. This was the smoking gun, but with every piece of evidence I found, I knew my time was running out. These were powerful people, and they wouldn't stop until they silenced me. I have to stay ahead of them, keep moving. I'm posting this now because if they catch me, at least the truth is out there. If you're reading this, please spread the word. Don't let them bury this. I'm going dark for a while, but I'll be back with more. Stay safe, everyone, and trust no one. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I'm back with more, but I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Things have taken a turn for the worse, and I'm scared out of my mind. If you've been following my story, you know I've uncovered something massive. The CIA is involved in child trafficking, and I have the proof. But every step closer to the truth, I get closer to them catching me. After my last post, I hit the road again, using back roads and avoiding main highways to stay off the grid. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I saw a dark car, my heart skipped a beat. Sleep was nearly impossible. Every creak or rustle had me reaching for the small knife I kept under my pillow. I decided to follow up on one of the whistleblower's leads. There was an old warehouse listed in his notes, somewhere he mentioned as a processing center. It was a long shot, but I had to see it for myself. The warehouse was in an industrial area of a big city, surrounded by derelict buildings and empty lots. Perfect place for something sinister. I waited until nightfall before making my move. The area was deserted, save for a few homeless people huddled around makeshift fires. I approached the warehouse cautiously, using the shadows to my advantage. The building was massive, its windows broken and walls covered in graffiti. I found a side door that looked like it hadn't been used in years. With some effort, I managed to pry it open and slipped inside. The air inside was thick with dust and decay. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing stacks of old crates and rusted machinery. It was eerily silent, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. As I moved deeper into the building, I found a set of stairs leading to the basement. The basement was worse. The smell hit me first. Mold, rot, and something else. Something metallic. My stomach churned. The flashlight beam flickered over old bloodstains on the floor and walls. This place had seen horrors I couldn't even begin to imagine. I found a small room at the back, the door hanging off its hinges. Inside, there were more bloodstains and a pile of old, filthy mattresses. I started taking pictures, documenting everything. I needed as much evidence as possible. As I turned to leave, I heard a noise, a faint shuffle coming from deeper in the basement. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned off my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear. The noise came again, closer this time. It sounded like footsteps. I held my breath, waiting. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. I could hear someone breathing. Slowly, I reached for my knife, praying I wouldn't have to use it. Suddenly, the door creaked open. I lunged, slashing blindly. There was a grunt of pain, and then a heavy thud as the person hit the ground. I switched the flashlight back on and saw a man lying there, clutching his side where I'd cut him. He was dressed in dark clothes, a gun lying just out of his reach. I kicked the gun away and grabbed his collar. "Who sent you?" I hissed. He laughed, a wet, choking sound. "You're dead," he rasped. "You don't even know it yet." I didn't have time for this. I searched his pockets and found a phone. Before I could do anything else, I heard more footsteps. This time, multiple people. I bolted, leaving the wounded man behind. I ran through the maze of the warehouse, the sound of pursuit close behind. I found a broken window and scrambled through it, cutting myself on the glass. Outside, I kept running, my breath burning in my lungs. I didn't stop until I was miles away, hiding in the shadows of another abandoned building. I knew I couldn't stay there long, but I needed to catch my breath. The phone I took was encrypted, but I knew someone who could help with that. The next day, I contacted an old friend, a hacker I trusted. I won't say his name here, but he's the best at what he does. We met in a secluded park, where I handed over the phone. He promised to get back to me as soon as he cracked it. In the meantime, I kept moving. A few days later, he called. The news was worse than I expected. The phone was full of messages, coordinates, and instructions. The men chasing me were part of a specialized unit, likely hired to take me out and recover the evidence. But there was more. One message stood out, a direct order from someone high up, referring to me as a priority target. I asked him to dig deeper, find out who was behind this. He agreed, but warned me to be careful. The deeper we went, the more dangerous it became. I decided to confront one of the names on the list, a local politician known for his anti-trafficking stance. I hoped he might be an ally. I waited outside his office, watching him leave for the day. When he finally did, I approached him, explaining who I was and what I had. He looked terrified, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out at him. "You need to get out of here," he whispered urgently. "They're watching. They're always watching." He handed me a slip of paper with an address on it. "Go there," he said. "You'll find someone who can help." Before I could ask anything else, he hurried away, leaving me standing there, more confused than ever. I followed the address to a rundown building on the edge of town. Inside, I found an underground network of people dedicated to exposing the truth. They had resources, connections, and most importantly, they believed me. But as I integrated into this group, I realized how deep and far-reaching this conspiracy went. The CIA's involvement in child trafficking was just the tip of the iceberg. They had their hands in everything: drugs, weapons, human experiments. The group shared stories of people who had disappeared, silenced for knowing too much. I knew then that my fight wasn't just about staying alive. It was about bringing these monsters to justice. I've gathered more evidence, made more connections, but it's getting harder to stay hidden. They're closing in, and I don't know how much longer I can keep running. If anything happens to me, this group will continue the fight. But for now, I'm still here, still fighting. Stay safe, everyone, and remember, the truth is out there. You just have to find it. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Thanks for sticking with me through this nightmare. Things have escalated even further, and I'm starting to feel like I'm running out of time. They're getting closer, and the more I uncover, the more dangerous it becomes. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, but I have to keep pushing forward. The truth needs to come out. After connecting with the underground group, I started working closely with them. These people are incredible. Hackers, whistleblowers, former law enforcement officers, all dedicated to exposing the horrific operations I stumbled upon. They've been a lifeline, helping me navigate this twisted conspiracy and providing me with the resources to continue my investigation. We decided it was time to go on the offensive. We couldn't just keep running and hiding. We had to strike back. One of our first targets was a high-ranking official listed in the documents. He was a key player in the trafficking ring, and we needed to take him down. We spent weeks gathering intel, tracking his movements, and planning our approach. One night, we launched our operation. We hacked into his home security system and disabled it, then broke in while he was asleep. We cornered him in his bedroom, and I confronted him with the evidence we had. He was a pathetic sight, cowering in fear, but I couldn't let my guard down. These people were capable of anything. "Who's behind this?" I demanded, shoving the documents in his face. "Tell me everything, or I swear you'll regret it." He was shaking, but he eventually started talking. He revealed names, locations, and details about the operation. It was worse than I imagined. The trafficking ring was just one part of a massive network involving high-ranking officials, celebrities, and even foreign governments. They were all connected, and they'd stop at nothing to protect their secrets. We recorded everything and left him there, knowing his confession wouldn't save him. These people didn't tolerate loose ends. We leaked the recording online, hoping to draw attention to the corruption, but the response was muted. The powers that be had too much control over the media. They spun the story, discrediting the official and painting him as a lone actor. It was frustrating, but we couldn't give up. Next, we decided to target one of the processing centers listed in the whistleblower's files. It was a remote facility in the middle of nowhere, heavily guarded. We needed a solid plan and a lot of luck to get inside. After weeks of planning, we were ready. We approached the facility under the cover of darkness, using night vision goggles to navigate the terrain. The building was surrounded by a tall fence topped with razor wire, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. We cut through the fence at a spot where the cameras were blind, then slipped inside. The interior was a maze of sterile hallways and locked doors. We moved quickly and quietly, avoiding the guards and security cameras. Eventually, we found what we were looking for. A large room filled with cages. My stomach turned as I saw the children inside, huddled together, their eyes vacant and lifeless. We started freeing them, one by one, but we knew we couldn't get them all out unnoticed. One of our team members hacked into the facility's mainframe, triggering a fire alarm to create a distraction. As chaos erupted, we led the children out through the emergency exits and into waiting vehicles. We managed to save dozens of kids that night, but I couldn't shake the images of those we had to leave behind. The facility was exposed, but it was just one of many. We had to keep moving, keep fighting. The children we rescued were taken to safe houses where they could receive medical care and psychological support. Their stories were heartbreaking. Abductions, abuse, conditioning. Some of them were too traumatized to speak, but the ones who did told us about the horrors they'd endured. It fueled our resolve to bring this operation down. But as our victories mounted, so did the danger. The people hunting me were growing more desperate. One night, while staying at a safe house, we were ambushed. Gunfire erupted, and we barely escaped with our lives. 2 of our members weren't so lucky. They paid the ultimate price for the truth. We were constantly on the move after that, never staying in one place for more than a night. I felt like a ghost, drifting through the shadows, always looking over my shoulder. Paranoia was my constant companion, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. One day, I received a message from my hacker friend. He'd uncovered something big, a name, someone at the very top of this twisted pyramid, a name I recognized. It was someone powerful, untouchable, someone who could ruin me with a single phone call, but I had to confront them. It was the only way to bring this all to light. We arranged a meeting in a public place, hoping the visibility would offer some protection. I met the contact in a crowded park, surrounded by families and joggers. They were nervous, constantly glancing around. I got straight to the point. "You know who I am," I said. "I need your help to bring this down. I have evidence, but I need more. I need names, details, everything." They were hesitant, but eventually agreed to help. They handed me a file, filled with documents and photographs. As I flipped through it, my heart sank. It was everything I needed, and more. Proof of the CIA's involvement, connections to foreign governments, and a list of high-profile clients. But there was a catch. They wanted something in return. Information about our group, our operations. I couldn't betray my friends, but I knew this was our best shot at taking down the operation. I had to make a choice. Risk everything for the chance to expose the truth or protect the people who had helped me survive. I decided to trust them. I handed over limited information, enough to keep them satisfied, but not enough to compromise us completely. It was a dangerous gamble, but I had no other choice. Now I'm sitting here, writing this, knowing the endgame is approaching. We have enough evidence to bring this whole operation crashing down, but the danger has never been greater. They're closing in, and I don't know how much longer we can keep running. If you're reading this, please share it. Spread the word. Don't let them silence us. The truth is out there, and we need your help to bring it to light. This might be my last post. If anything happens to me, know that I fought to the end. Stay safe, everyone. And remember, the fight isn't over yet. Hey Reddit, it's me again. This will likely be my last post. The walls are closing in, and I can feel the noose tightening around my neck. But I have to see this through to the end. The truth needs to come out. And if I can get this message to you, maybe, just maybe, we can expose the monsters behind this nightmare. After my last post, we knew we were running out of time. The evidence we gathered was explosive, but we needed to deliver it to someone who could actually do something with it. Someone who wasn't in the pockets of these powerful men. We decided to go to the press. Not just any journalist, but someone with a reputation for exposing corruption, someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated. We reached out to a renowned investigative journalist, let's call her Jane. She had a history of taking on the powerful and coming out on top. We arranged a meeting in a remote location, deep in the woods, where we thought we'd be safe. Jane agreed to meet us, intrigued by our story. The night before the meeting, we stayed in a cabin provided by one of our underground contacts. It was secluded, surrounded by dense forest. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could finally bring this to an end. Maybe we could finally get justice for the victims. But as always, the darkness followed us. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of rustling outside. I crept to the window and saw shadows moving through the trees. Panic surged through me. They'd found us. I woke everyone up, and we grabbed our things, ready to bolt. But it was too late. They surrounded the cabin, and we were trapped. I heard a voice through a megaphone, cold and authoritative. "Come out with your hands up, and we'll let you live." We knew it was a lie. They had no intention of letting us walk away. We were loose ends that needed tying up. We barricaded the doors and windows, preparing for the worst. One of our members, a former Marine, took charge, organizing us into defensive positions. We weren't going down without a fight. The first shots rang out, shattering the cabin's windows. We returned fire, but we were outnumbered and outgunned. I could hear them moving closer, their boots crunching on the gravel. Desperation set in. We had to get the evidence to Jane, no matter what. In the chaos, I grabbed the USB drives and shoved them into a small waterproof bag. I knew I had to make a run for it. One of our hackers, a brave kid named Alex, created a diversion by setting off a smoke bomb near the back of the cabin. Under the cover of smoke, I slipped out the front door and ran into the forest. Bullets whizzed past me as I sprinted through the trees. My lungs burned and my heart pounded in my ears. I could hear them behind me, their shouts and footsteps getting closer. I had to keep going. I couldn't let them catch me. I ran for what felt like hours, zigzagging through the woods, trying to lose them. Eventually, I stumbled upon an old dirt road. I followed it, hoping it would lead me to safety. The sun was starting to rise, casting an eerie glow through the trees. I was exhausted, but I couldn't stop now. Finally, I reached a small clearing where Jane was waiting. She saw me and rushed over, helping me into her car. "Drive!" I gasped. "They're right behind me." We sped off, the tyres kicking up dirt and gravel. Jane drove like a mad woman, taking sharp turns and pushing the car to its limits. I glanced back and saw the black SUVs in the distance, but they were falling behind. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe we might actually make it. We reached the safety of a nearby town, where Jane had arranged a secure location to review the evidence. I handed her the bag with the USB drives, my hands shaking. "This is it," I said. "Everything you need to blow this wide open." Jane nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll take it from here. You've done enough. Go, hide, stay safe." I knew she was right. I'd done all I could. It was up to her now. I disappeared into the crowd, blending in with the morning commuters. I found a cheap motel and checked in, using a fake name. I collapsed on the bed, my body and mind exhausted. I turned on the TV, hoping to see something, anything about the story breaking. Hours passed. I drifted in and out of sleep, my dreams haunted by the faces of the children we couldn't save. Then, finally, a news alert flashed on the screen. "Breaking! Major expose on government corruption and child trafficking." Jane had done it. She'd released the story, and it was spreading like wildfire. News outlets were picking it up. Social media was ablaze. The names of the powerful men involved were being broadcast for the world to see. There was no way they could cover this up now, but I knew it wasn't over. They would come for me, for Jane, for everyone involved. I had to keep moving, stay one step ahead. But at least now, the truth was out there. The world knew, and maybe, just maybe, justice would be served. I'm signing off for now, Reddit. I don't know if I'll ever be able to post again, but if you've read this far, if you've shared my story, then you've helped. Keep fighting, keep pushing for the truth, and never, ever let them win. Stay safe, and remember, the darkness is always there, but so is the light. I found CIA documents on alien hybrid experiments, and now they're coming for me. I never thought my mundane job at a storage facility would lead me to where I am now, hiding in a decrepit motel room, with nothing but my laptop and a paranoid mind keeping me company. My name is Rick, and up until a month ago, I was just another guy working a dead-end job, trying to make ends meet. The storage facility where I worked was a haven for forgotten junk, unclaimed inheritances, and occasionally weird stuff that never made sense. It all started when a particularly nondescript locker came up for auction. The previous owner had stopped paying rent, and as per policy, the contents were up for grabs. Most of the time, these auctions attracted a few regulars looking for anything of value. But this locker was different. It was plain, grey, and had no identifying marks. No one bid on it, so my boss told me to clear it out. As I opened the locker, I was hit by a musty smell, like old books and something metallic. Inside, I found several metal boxes, locked and covered in dust. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pried one open. Inside, I found stacks of yellowed documents stamped with official-looking seals. At first, I thought it was some sort of historical paperwork, but then I saw the words CIA and Top Secret printed on the top sheet. My heart raced as I skimmed through the pages. What I found was beyond comprehension. These documents detailed experiments that the CIA had conducted during the Cold War, involving what they referred to as alien hybrids. The reports spoke of abductions, genetic experiments, and grotesque procedures that sounded like something out of a horror movie. There were diagrams of human bodies, with foreign DNA sequences highlighted, and photos of strange, deformed creatures that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was as if I had stumbled upon a nightmare that was meant to stay hidden. The most disturbing part was the detailed accounts of the subjects, people who had been taken against their will, experimented on, and then either disposed of or released with altered memories. There were handwritten notes in the margins, suggesting ongoing experiments and even more terrifying advancements in hybridization. I knew I should have reported this to the authorities, but something about the whole situation made me uneasy. What if the documents were real? What if the people behind these experiments were still out there, watching, waiting? Against my better judgment, I decided to take the documents home. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to understand the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. The images and descriptions from the documents haunted me. I decided to dig deeper, scanning the papers and searching for any corroborating information online. To my surprise, I found obscure forums and conspiracy websites that hinted at similar stories. People spoke of strange encounters, missing time, and unexplained scars. It seemed like I wasn't the only one who had stumbled upon this dark secret. The more I read, the more paranoid I became. I started noticing strange things around my apartment. Items slightly out of place, my computer acting up, and the feeling of being watched. I shrugged it off as paranoia, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, as I was poring over the documents, I heard a noise outside my window. I lived on the second floor, so it was unusual to hear anything from that direction. I cautiously peeked through the blinds and saw a shadowy figure standing in the alley below. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the figure move, almost inhumanly, before disappearing into the darkness. The next day, things took a turn for the worse. I received an anonymous email with a single line, "You shouldn't have taken those documents." Attached was a photo of me at the storage facility, prying open the metal boxes. My blood ran cold. Whoever sent the email knew where I was and what I had done. Panic set in. I packed a bag with essentials and left my apartment, not knowing where to go or who to trust. Since then, I've been on the run, moving from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead of whoever is after me. The documents are still with me, hidden away, but I can't bring myself to destroy them. They're my only proof, the only evidence that what I found was real. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Every day is a new nightmare, and I fear it's only a matter of time before they catch up to me. If you're reading this, please be careful. The truth is out there, but it's buried under layers of secrecy and danger. I don't know who to trust or where to turn. All I know is that I'm in way over my head, and the shadows are closing in. I thought I could stay ahead of them. I thought moving from one cheap motel to the next, changing my appearance, and using burner phones would keep me safe. But I was wrong. They were always one step behind, and it became painfully clear that I was dealing with something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. After a few days on the run, I started noticing black SUVs everywhere I went. They were never far, always lingering in the background. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew they were watching me. It didn't matter if I was in a crowded city or a small town. Those damn vehicles were always there, lurking like vultures. One night, in a small motel just off a desolate highway, I decided to take a stand. I was tired of running and needed answers. I barricaded myself in my room, armed with nothing more than a rusty pocket knife, and the paranoia that had become my constant companion. The documents were spread out on the bed, taunting me with their grotesque secrets. I spent hours going over them again, looking for any clue that might help me understand who was after me and why. The more I read, the more horrifying it became. Detailed reports of surgical procedures that made my stomach churn, photographs of hybrid creatures that seemed to defy nature, and testimonies from former agents who had tried to blow the whistle, only to vanish without a trace. There was one name that kept popping up, Dr. Jonathan Weir. According to the documents, he was the lead scientist behind the hybrid experiments. His methods were brutal, his ethics non-existent. He treated his subjects like lab rats, pushing the boundaries of human and alien DNA integration. The results were catastrophic. Most of the subjects died in agony, their bodies rejecting the foreign DNA in the most gruesome ways imaginable. Those who survived were changed, twisted versions of their former selves, with abilities and appearances that bordered on the monstrous. As I was piecing together Dr. Weir's involvement, I heard a noise outside my door. My heart lapped into my throat as I listened intently. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned off the lights and held my breath, clutching the pocket knife so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The footsteps grew closer, stopping just outside my door. There was a soft knock, followed by a voice that sent chills down my spine. "Rick, we know you're in there. Open the door and no one gets hurt." My mind raced. How did they find me? I had been so careful. I glanced at the documents, my eyes landing on a photograph of one of the hybrids. Its soulless eyes seemed to bore into me, mocking my predicament. I knew I had no choice. If I stayed, they'd break down the door. If I ran, they'd catch me. I had to think fast. The voice outside grew impatient. "Rick, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We just want the documents." Just the documents? I doubted that. I grabbed my bag, stuffed the papers inside, and opened the window. I was on the second floor, but there was a fire escape. I climbed out, trying to be as quiet as possible. As I descended, I heard the door burst open behind me. Shouts filled the room, and I knew I had only seconds before they realized I was gone. I hit the ground running, sprinting towards the highway. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and adrenaline. I needed a plan, but all I could think about was getting as far away from that motel as possible. The night was pitch black, and the highway stretched out before me like a never-ending nightmare. I ran for what felt like hours, the sound of my own ragged breathing filling my ears. When I finally stopped, my legs were burning, and I could barely catch my breath. I ducked into a dense thicket by the side of the road, hoping it would provide some cover. I listened intently for any sign of pursuit, but all I could hear was the distant hum of traffic. As I crouched there, trembling with exhaustion and fear, I pulled out one of the documents. It was a detailed report on an experiment labelled Project Chimera. The subject had been a young woman, abducted from her home in the middle of the night. The report described how they had injected her with alien DNA, monitoring her progress as her body twisted and mutated. The final entry made my blood run cold. Subject terminated. Uncontrollable aggression. Recommended for immediate disposal. I couldn't shake the image of that woman. Her life stolen and transformed into something out of a nightmare. And for what? To satisfy the twisted curiosity of men like Dr. Weir? I knew then that I had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. People needed to know what was happening in the shadows, the horrors being perpetrated under the guise of scientific advancement. But first, I had to survive. And that meant staying one step ahead of my pursuers, whoever they were. I didn't know who to trust or where to turn, but I couldn't give up. Not now, not when the truth was so close. I knew I couldn't keep running forever. My options were running out, and I was getting desperate. Every corner I turned, every shadow I hid in, it felt like they were right behind me. After that close call at the motel, I decided to head towards the one place I thought I could find some answers. An old friend from college, Kevin. He was a conspiracy theorist, the kind of guy who believed in everything from Bigfoot to government cover-ups. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. I made my way to Kevin's place, a small cabin in the middle of nowhere. It took me 2 days of hitchhiking and hiding in the back of trucks, but I finally got there. Kevin greeted me with his usual paranoid suspicion, peering out from behind thick curtains before opening the door. When he saw it was me, his face lit up with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Rick, what the hell happened to you? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, pulling me inside. I didn't waste any time. I dumped the bag on his table and showed him the documents. His eyes widened as he sifted through them, his expression shifting from disbelief to horror. "Jesus, Rick, this is huge. But it's dangerous. If what you're saying is true, you're in a lot of trouble. I nodded, rubbing my temples as a headache threatened to split my skull. I know, Kevin. I need your help. They're after me, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Kevin agreed to help me. He had a network of contacts in the conspiracy world, people who might be able to get the word out and expose the truth. For the next few days, we stayed holed up in his cabin, scanning the documents and sending them to trusted sources. Kevin's paranoia, once annoying, now seemed like a godsend. He had all sorts of precautions in place, encrypted emails, secure channels, and safe houses. But it wasn't long before things started to go wrong. On the fourth night, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. Kevin's warning systems were going off, a cacophony of alarms and flashing lights. We barely had time to grab the essentials before the front door was kicked in. Men in black tactical gear stormed the cabin, their faces obscured by masks. They moved with military precision, sweeping through the rooms, shouting commands. Kevin and I scrambled out a back window, disappearing into the thick forest surrounding the cabin. We ran for what felt like hours, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Eventually, we found a small cave and huddled inside, trying to catch our breath. "Rick," Kevin whispered, his voice trembling. "They're not just after the documents. They want us too. We're witnesses, loose ends." His words chilled me to the bone. I had been so focused on the documents that I hadn't considered what they might do to us. We were expendable, collateral damage in a much larger game. The next morning, we continued our escape, moving cautiously through the forest. Kevin knew the area well, and we managed to avoid any major roads or populated areas. But it was clear we couldn't keep running forever. We needed a plan, a way to fight back. Kevin suggested we find one of his contacts, a hacker named Lily, who specialized in exposing government secrets. According to Kevin, she was a genius, someone who could break into even the most secure systems. If anyone could help us, it was her. It took us another 2 days to reach Lily's place, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of a forgotten town. She greeted us with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, her fingers constantly tapping on a laptop. "So you're the guys causing all this trouble," she said, her eyes flicking between us and the documents. "Let me see what you've got." For the next few hours, Lily worked her magic. She hacked into secure servers, tracing the origins of the documents and uncovering even more disturbing information. It seemed the experiments had continued long after the Cold War, evolving into something even more sinister. There were references to recent abductions, new hybridization techniques, and disturbing mentions of enhanced interrogation methods. Lily's face grew pale as she read. "This is bad, really bad. But if we can get this out there, we might have a chance. I know some people, journalists who won't back down, no matter the threat." Just as we started to feel a glimmer of hope, the building shook with the force of an explosion. Debris rained down, and we were thrown to the ground. Through the smoke and dust, I saw the black-clad figures moving in, their guns trained on us. We had seconds to react. Kevin and Lily grabbed their laptops, and we made a desperate dash for the back exit. The sounds of gunfire and shouting filled the air as we burst out into the alleyway. I felt a sharp pain in my side but kept running, driven by sheer terror and adrenaline. We split up, hoping to confuse our pursuers. I ran blindly through the maze of alleys, my vision blurring with pain and exhaustion. Eventually, I found a hiding spot behind a dumpster, pressing my hand to my side to staunch the bleeding. My thoughts were a chaotic swirl of fear and determination. We had the truth, the evidence, but now our very lives were on the line. I didn't know where Kevin or Lily were, if they had made it out, or if they were captured. All I knew was that I had to survive, to keep running, and somehow get the word out. As I lay there, hidden in the shadows, I realized just how far-reaching and ruthless the people behind these experiments were. They wouldn't stop until they had silenced us, erased every trace of their atrocities. But I couldn't let them win. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost, and I would fight with every last breath to make sure it did. I don't remember how long I stayed hidden behind that dumpster. Time seemed to blur, and my side throbbed with a relentless, dull pain. I knew I couldn't stay there forever, but the thought of moving terrified me. Eventually, necessity forced me out of my hiding spot. The bleeding had slowed, but I was weak and dizzy. I had to find somewhere safe, somewhere I could regroup and figure out my next move. I stumbled through the back alleys until I reached a rundown gas station. The place looked like it hadn't seen a customer in years, but the lights were still on. I crept inside, hoping to find some first aid supplies and maybe a phone to call for help. The cashier, an elderly man with a weathered face, looked up as I entered. His eyes widened when he saw the state I was in. "You look like hell, son," he said, coming around the counter. "What happened to you?" I didn't have the energy to explain. "Please, I need some bandages and a phone," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded and led me to a small back room where he kept a first aid kit. As he bandaged my wound, he asked no questions, and for that I was grateful. He handed me an old rotary phone, and I dialed the only number I could think of, Lily's encrypted line. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before she answered. Her voice was tense, laced with fear. "Rick, is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need help. Where are you?" Lily gave me an address to a safe house, a location she assured me was secure. "Get there as fast as you can. We're running out of time." I thanked the cashier and left the gas station, feeling a little more hopeful. The walk to the safe house was agonizingly slow. Every step sent waves of pain through my body, but I forced myself to keep going. When I finally reached the address, I was greeted by Lily and Kevin, both looking as haggard as I felt. Lily quickly ushered me inside and locked the door behind us. The safe house was a small, cluttered apartment, filled with computer equipment and stacks of documents. Kevin looked up from his laptop, relief washing over his face when he saw me. "We thought you were dead," he said, standing to help me to a chair. "What happened?" I gave them a brief rundown of my escape and the close call at the gas station. Lily's face grew even more grim. "They're getting closer. We need to move fast." She pulled up a series of files on her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've managed to decrypt more of the documents. There's a facility, a lab where they're conducting these experiments. If we can get in there and gather evidence, we might have enough to blow this whole thing wide open." The idea of infiltrating a secret lab filled me with dread, but I knew she was right. We had to take the risk if we wanted to expose the truth. Kevin and Lily spent the next few hours planning our next move, mapping out the facility's layout and identifying potential entry points. As they worked, I sifted through the new information Lily had uncovered. The documents were more detailed than anything we had seen before, including video footage of the experiments. I watched in horror as men and women were strapped to tables, their bodies writhing in agony as they were injected with alien DNA. The transformations were monstrous, their screams echoing in my mind long after the videos ended. One file, in particular, caught my attention. It was labelled Project Genesis and contained a list of subjects, people who had been taken recently, including their last known locations. My heart sank as I recognised one of the names, Emily Hart, my ex-girlfriend. We had broken up years ago, but the thought of her being caught up in this nightmare was too much to bear. I showed the file to Kevin and Lily. "We have to save them," I said, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "We can't let them do this to more people." Lily nodded. "We will, but we need to be smart about it. If we go in guns blazing, we'll all end up dead." The plan was risky, but it was our only shot. We would infiltrate the facility, gather as much evidence as we could, and rescue the subjects if possible. It felt like a suicide mission, but the alternative was unthinkable. The next night, we made our move. The facility was located in a remote part of the countryside, surrounded by high fences and patrolled by armed guards. We parked a mile away and approached on foot, using the cover of darkness to our advantage. Kevin had managed to hack into the security system, giving us a brief window to slip inside. The interior of the facility was cold and sterile. the air thick with the smell of antiseptic. We moved quickly and quietly, navigating the labyrinthine corridors. Lily led us to a control room, where she accessed the main server and began downloading files. Kevin and I stood guard, our nerves on edge. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and an alarm blared through the building. "They know we're here," Kevin said, his voice tight with fear. Lily cursed under her breath. "I need a few more minutes, hold them off." The next few moments were a blur of chaos and violence. Guards stormed the room, and Kevin and I fought desperately to hold them back. I managed to grab a guard's gun, firing blindly as adrenaline surged through me. The smell of gunpowder and blood filled the air, and I felt a bullet graze my arm, the pain barely registering in the heat of the moment. Lily shouted, "I've got it, let's go." We fled the control room, the guards hot on our heels. The facility was in lockdown, red lights flashing and doors slamming shut. We raced down the corridors, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. As we rounded a corner, we found ourselves face to face with more guards. There was no way out. In a desperate bid, Kevin hurled a makeshift explosive he had cobbled together from the lab supplies. The blast shook the walls, and smoke filled the hallway. We used the chaos to slip past the guards, our lungs burning from the effort. We reached the lab, where the subjects were held, their faces pale and eyes hollow. Emily was there, strapped to a table, her body already showing signs of transformation. My heart broke at the sight, but there was no time for emotion. "Rick," she whispered, her voice weak. "It's me," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "We're getting you out of here." We unstrapped the subjects and led them to the exit, fighting off guards at every turn. It was a desperate, bloody struggle, but somehow we made it out. The fresh air felt like a miracle as we stumbled into the night, the facility behind us going up in flames. As we drove away, I couldn't help but think of the horrors we had witnessed, the lives destroyed by those experiments. But we had the evidence, the proof we needed to expose the truth. The road ahead was still dangerous, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were no longer just running. We were fighting back. The safe house felt different now, filled with the presence of those we had rescued. The subjects were weak, traumatized, but alive. Emily was among them, her eyes haunted but grateful. We had achieved the impossible, but the hardest part was still ahead, exposing the truth to the world. Kevin and Lily worked around the clock, sifting through the massive trove of data we had secured from the facility. The files contained irrefutable evidence of the experiments, the cover-ups, and the horrifying results. Video footage, personal testimonies, and internal memos. Everything we needed to blow the lid off this conspiracy. Lily made contact with her journalist connections, arranging a secure meeting to hand over the evidence. We were all on edge, knowing that our enemies would stop at nothing to silence us. The days leading up to the meeting were tense, filled with constant vigilance and paranoia. The night before the meeting, Emily and I sat on the porch of the safe house, the cool night air a brief respite from our ordeal. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Thank you, Rick," she said softly, "for coming back for me." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I couldn't leave you behind, Emily. None of this feels real, but we're going to make sure the world knows the truth." The next morning, we set out for the rendezvous point, a secluded cabin deep in the woods where Lily's contacts were waiting. The drive was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. The weight of what we were about to do pressed heavily on my shoulders. When we arrived, the journalists greeted us with a mix of skepticism and awe as we handed over the evidence. They quickly realized the magnitude of what we had brought them. Cameras were set up, interviews conducted, and the horrifying details of the experiments were documented. Just as we were about to finish, the sound of helicopters filled the air, and black SUVs appeared on the horizon. "They found us!" Kevin shouted, his voice filled with panic. We scrambled to protect the journalists and the subjects, guiding them to a hidden bunker beneath the cabin. The ground shook as the first explosions hit, the air thick with dust and fear. I looked at Lily, her face set with determination. "We can't let them destroy the evidence," she said. The next few minutes were a blur of chaos. Gunfire erupted outside as our pursuers tried to breach the cabin. We fought back with everything we had, determined to protect the truth. I saw Kevin fall, a bullet catching him in the chest. He looked at me, pain and resignation in his eyes. "Get them out," he gasped, before the light faded from his eyes. Lily and I managed to hold them off long enough for the journalist to transmit the evidence. I could hear the frantic typing of keyboards, the hum of machinery as files were uploaded and sent out to news agencies around the world. The truth was finally out, beyond their reach. But it came at a cost. The cabin was breached, and Lily and I were captured. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the relieved faces of the journalists as they completed their mission. I woke up in a sterile white room, my hands and feet bound. A man in a suit stood over me, his expression cold and calculating. "You've caused a lot of trouble," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But it's over now." I laughed, the sound hollow and defiant. "No, it's not. The world knows now. You can't hide it anymore." He leaned in close, his eyes filled with a chilling calm. "We'll see about that." Days turned into weeks as I was moved from one dark cell to another, interrogated and tortured for information I refused to give. I thought it was the end, that I would never see the light of day again. But then, one night, the door to my cell swung open, and Lily stood there, bruised, but alive. "We have to go," she whispered, helping me to my feet. "The evidence worked. There's a raid happening right now. We're getting out." We stumbled through the facility, the sounds of gunfire and shouting echoing around us. Outside, the dawn was breaking, the first light of day casting long shadows on the ground. We made it to a waiting car, driven by one of the journalists we had helped. As we sped away, I looked back at the burning facility, a sense of grim satisfaction filling me. The truth was out, and the world was watching. The fight wasn't over, but we had won a crucial battle. We were free, but forever changed by the horrors we had witnessed. In the weeks that followed, the story dominated headlines around the globe. Governments were forced to answer for their actions, and the people demanded justice for the victims of the experiments. Emily and the other survivors began the long road to recovery, their bravery and resilience a beacon of hope. As for me, I stayed in the shadows, helping where I could, knowing that my fight was far from over. The scars I bore were a reminder of the price of truth, but I would carry them with pride. We had exposed the darkness, and in doing so, brought a sliver of light to the world. And so my story ends not with a resolution, but with a promise to never stop seeking the truth, to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and to remember the friends we lost along the way. The shadows still lurk, but as long as there are people willing to stand up and shine a light, they will never prevail.